Professor King, Professor Zhu, Professor Zhu, guests from near and far. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to the International Conference on Innovation in Political Methodology and China Study. This important conference is organized by the Department of Political Science at the National Taiwan University. And we have invited many famous scholars from the United States, Australia, mainland China, Hong Kong, and from here in Taiwan. We are especially honored to welcome Professor Gary King to give two keynote speech. We very much hope that through this conference, we will deeper exchange between scholars in Taiwan and around the world. The Department of Political Science is extremely proud to host an event such as this, which gives an opportunity for our scholars to interact with some of varieties of mind in political science and methodology. The exchange of ideas and the building of the relation with institutions and around the world is one of the primary aims of our department. And we hope to increase the frequency of conferences such as this in the future. This conference can be held successfully. I would like to thank many organizations and individuals for their sponsorship or assistance. For example, the Ministry of Science and Technology, the Main Affairs Council, the President and the Vice President of the Alumnus Committee of Department of Political Science, Mr. Hu Bingwu and Mr. Han Bingguo, Executive Secretary Conference, Jason Guo. There are also many assistants working hard at the Center for East Asian Democratic Studies. Without their help, the conference will not be held successfully. I don't say much here. Everyone is hoping to hear Gary King's keynote speech. Once again, thank you for your participation. I wish the conference great success, and all of you all the best. Thank you.
First of all, speaking on behalf of the Center for East Asia Democratic Study of the NTU, I would like to welcome you all to this great gathering. We have not just our distinguished keynote speaker today, but also we have many colleagues who have flown a long distance to be part of this event. We have a colleague who come from the United States, from Australia, and from mainland China, and also welcome all our colleagues and students on campus. The focus of this conference is on innovation of political methodology and China study. We know that political science field I witnessed many important methodological innovation over the last 20 years. And we are very fortunate that we have one leading light in this endeavor, pushing forward the frontier of our research methodology. At the same time, I think China study, one of the most burgeoning, but also most challenging field. China, for mainstream social scientists, is probably the hardest nut to crack. Many received views, many conventional wisdom has been challenged by the experience of the miraculous growth of China over the last 40 years. It challenged everything we know about whether economization will lead to political liberalization, okay? Whether good governance is a prerequisite for sustainable economic growth. It challenged our view about relationships between political region and social capital, and so on and so forth. But so far, on the one hand, China posed the biggest anomaly to many of the established generalizations in theory. On the other hand, I think the mainstream social scientists tend to ignore or downplay this anomaly by treating China just as another data point. If you think of it, when you do macro level cross-national analysis, okay, essentially you give equal weight, right, to every country. So you you make, China is equivalent to Luxembourg, right, basically. And Luxembourg is smaller than most of the counties in China. Or equivalent to Belgium. Belgium is not much bigger than most of the prefectures in China. So if you think that, from this angle, I don't know how we can really, pretend, that China is anyone else, okay? Given its continental side, given the fact that it's almost like a small universe in and by itself. So I think today, we're going to listen to the keynote speech, but also to a lot of brilliant presentation based on, how they have been able to apply some innovative approach to crack this nut. Okay, and I think the field is wide open. It's most inviting, most exciting, but also most challenging. So I think that's probably the reason why you are all here. So without further ado, I now want to properly introduce our keynote speaker today, Professor Gary King. He's the Albert Weatherhead III University Professor. And this is University Professor in Harvard. It's the most distinguished title. Only 26 members of the Harvard faculty member carry University Professor title. And Dr. King also is a member at least 7 honorable societies, maybe more, I might have lost count, including the National Academy of Science, including the American Academy of Art and Science. And he has won many, many awards and prizes in recognition of his great achievement in advancing some of the most cutting-edge research methodology, which is not just benefiting social science community, but also the social science community as a whole. So here we are, without further ado. Please join me in welcoming Professor Gary King.
Let's make sure. Yep. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for the invitation. Thanks for being here. Thanks for the great introduction. Thanks for the hospitality. I really enjoyed it. If you want to keep going with the introduction, that was really fun. If anybody has questions along the way, I'd be happy to take them. So this is a project that I'm proud to present at this conference in particular on both methodology and China. Because when we started this project, we didn't intend to study China. Okay? We intended to study methodology. So this is with my co-authors Jen Pan and Molly Roberts. They were both graduate students of mine at the time, and Jen is at Stanford and Molly is at UCSD now. And what we were studying was automated text analysis. Okay, now normally when I give this talk to a China audience, they don't know what that is. You guys know what that is. Okay, so we were just studying automated text analysis in English. Okay, that's what we were studying. That's what we had intended to write a paper on automated text analysis. I had developed some automated text analysis in the past, and it was by standard procedures licensed. But we patented the technology, and the patent was licensed to a startup company. It's now called Crimson Hexagon. It goes around the world. It collects all social media posts, and then it uses the methods that we developed to sell brand monitoring to companies or politicians or nonprofits or to countries and things like that. And so I thought there was a way of improving this technology. And I said to Molly and Jen, let's work on this. And I thought the way that we would do this is we would push the method until it broke. So how do you do that, right? So what we thought was, let's try it in a different language. And as it happened, Molly and Jen both spoke Chinese. And we thought, let's try it in Chinese. We've developed these methods for English. Chinese works a little differently than English, obviously. And we thought, let's try it. So we called over to Crimson Hexagon, and they sent us a database of social media posts in Chinese from China. that included the post and the URL from which it came. And we tried our methods, and we pushed the methods forward, and it didn't work in some areas. And we adapted it, and we pushed, and it improved. And we were going to write a paper on automated text analysis. And then we thought, well, we'd figured out how to do it in Chinese. So we thought, we'll write a paper on automated text analysis in Chinese. And then at one point, I said to Molly and Jen, why don't you go back to the website from which these posts came, click on the URLs that came from Crimson Hexagon, and just let's understand the context in which we got, from which the post came. And so they came back to my office and they said, there's something wrong with the data from Crimson Hexagon. Because sometimes we click on the post and it goes to the website. It looks like a Chinese version of Facebook, right? They wouldn't know that, of course, but that's what it looks like. But sometimes when you click on it, it doesn't go anywhere. Crimson Hexagon gets 1,400 different social media sites in China, so not just Weibo, all kinds of different ones. And sometimes you click on it, it doesn't go anywhere, they said. So I said, show me. So we go to my computer in my office, and we're clicking on the posts. And sure enough, sometimes it goes to the website. Sometimes nothing happens. But on the web, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything, right? And then we clicked once, and it said, this social media post is being investigated. And I literally said, this is a social media post. Who investigates social media posts? Of course, right? China investigates social media posts. And Crimson Hexagon had the ability to, they didn't realize it, but they had the ability to, and we therefore had the ability to download social media posts before the Chinese government could censor them. We had the entire corpus of censored social media posts that the Chinese people could not read because they were not allowed to, but we could. And we thought, let's forget that paper on automated text analysis. And we designed a system to go back to every website to figure out whether the post was still up. And we labeled every post as censored, not censored, and we did the study. Okay. And I'll tell you what we found, but the big thing we found is that the information controls in China, the propaganda effort, is so large that even though its purpose is to slow the flow of information, it actually conveys a tremendous amount of information about the intentions and goals and purposes of the leaders of China. So it's like a big elephant tiptoeing around. It leaves big footprints. Okay, and that's what this talks about. Okay. So we wrote this paper, which is actually about just figuring out whether the social media posts are the ones that are censored and not censored, and how they differed. And then we did an experiment where we literally posted things that we wrote, social media posts that we wrote, randomly on the web in China to see whether they were censored. We wrote some in support of government, some opposed to the government, some for protest, some against protest, and we figured that out. And then there's this paper on the Chinese 50-cent party where they fabricate social media posts and put them on the web. There's never been any evidence of this before, but I'll tell you what we figured out. That's this paper. And then there's a whole bunch of other papers that I'm happy to tell you about. They're on automated text analysis and clustering and keyword and all kinds of methods things. But usually when I give this talk, then nobody cares about those. But that's what we cared about. Okay. So this is the background. All right. So here's our summary of the first two papers, just to give us a story. So everybody knows the goal of censorship. This is what we knew when we started. Everybody knows this. It's to stop criticism, protest, and collective action about the state, its leaders, and their policies. And what did we learn when we started studying this obvious point that everybody knows? What we learned was it's utterly and completely wrong. Okay, what we knew was true was false. Okay, and as a political scientist, I really like to use the word wrong or true or false because we don't get to use that word very often. So we asked ourselves, what could be the goal? And we had a big pile of social media posts that were censored and one that was uncensored. And we used some lens to look at that, like whether it was criticizing the state or whether it was sensitive, right? That's what the literature often says. Sensitive posts are censored and non-sensitive posts are not censored. So we looked at what the definition of sensitive was. And we had people code whether the posts were sensitive or not sensitive. And the percent censored among the sensitive posts was almost the same as the percent censored among the not sensitive posts. So the concept of sensitive is basically fabricated by us. And it's not right. It doesn't predict whether the Chinese government censors it. So we ask the question in a lot of different ways. By the way, the idea that theory is dead because we can estimate everything empirically because there's so much data is ridiculous. Once you have so much data, you need a theoretical lens in order to look at things. And for a long time, we were looking at this through the wrong theoretical lens, and we didn't see anything. Until one day, we said, wait a second, let's separate the goals. Let's ask the question, what could be the goal of censorship? And we wrote down, well, it could be to stop criticism of the state, or it could be to stop collective action, right? And we separated them. We asked the question separately. When we did that, everything tremendously clarified. And we found that the first was wrong and the second was right. So let me explain this. So you can, in China, you can write on social media, the leaders of this town are all stealing money. Here's how much. These are the bank accounts, these are the overseas bank accounts in which they have their money stashed. And by the way, they all have mistresses, and here are their names. That won't be censored. But if you say, and let's go protest, and there's a protest on the ground related to that, so it's a real point, that will be censored. In fact, if you say the leaders of this other town are doing such a great job, let's have a rally in their favor. Censored. Okay? They don't care what you think of them. They are a bunch of dictators. What should you think of them? Right? You know, what they care about is if you have the ability to stop them, because they have a pretty good thing going, and they'd like to keep it going. The thing that can stop them, the only thing that can stop them, it's not the West. It may not even be Taiwan. right? It's not military power. Right? The Chinese government has nuclear weapons. Like the West is not going to be attacking them anytime soon. Right? What is it that they have to fear? Their own people. That's what they have to fear. They have to fear people rising up. That's what gets people who control autocracies thrown out of power. And so they don't care what you think of them. You can criticize them. You can say things in their favor. It doesn't matter. They care about whether you have the ability to move crowds. And if you do, they'll stop you. That's what we found. So what's the implication of this? The implication of this is that social media is actionable for them and for us as researchers. So this is sort of cool. So the Chinese leaders measure criticism. They don't only ignore criticism, they like it. Not that they want it. They don't want the criticism, but they allow it. They don't allow their local leaders to stop the criticism. Right? So what does that mean? They use the criticism to judge local officials. Right? If you're running China, you have to worry about 700,000 towns and cities across China. How do you do that? How do you monitor the leaders of 700,000 towns? You could run public opinion polls in every area, but that's not exactly feasible, right? So what do? Well, what they seem to do is monitor criticism on social media of the leaders of each of those towns. And if one of the leaders is engendering too much criticism, then they'll replace that leader. So criticism is very useful for the Chinese leaders because they see it. It's a kind of evil genius thing, isn't it? Right? It's an amazing thing. They don't care about criticizing them, but they watch. Right? Okay. They then censor to stop events with collective action potential, with anything that either is a protest now or is likely to generate a protest. So the interesting thing is that as researchers, we can then use criticism and censorship to predict all kinds of things that we wouldn't be able to otherwise, right? Because this big elephant tiptoeing around leaves big footprints. So we can predict which officials are in trouble and likely to be replaced. And we have predicted that this one is going to be taken out and that one gets taken out. We can tell ahead of time. The media can't tell, right? Theorists can't tell, but we can see. We can see the information the Chinese leaders have, and so we can tell ahead of time. We can measure directly which policies are generating dissent and interests of the leaders. We can predict government action outside the internet, including what predictions we have made that have been accurate, which dissidents are going to be arrested, which peace treaties are going to be signed, and emerging scandals. We don't actually know what the scandal is when it's going to appear, but we know something's up. We basically get a different view of the universe by looking at scale at all of the millions and millions of social media posts all across China. We get a different view into China than you could have otherwise, all from doing political methodology. That was really the goal. Oh, and then also, of course, we can see things that we all have theorized about for a long time, like disagreements between the central government and local leaders, which you can't is not really visible, but we can see it. So let me tell you about censorship or revealing government goals. I'll just give you a few examples of this. So this is a small sample of data where the vertical axis is the count of social media posts. The horizontal axis is 6 months of time. The gray is the total number of social media posts. In this area, this is all about this dissident Ai Weiwei. You know this guy? Right? Okay. Famous dissident artist, made this stadium during the last Winter Olympics. This is the number of social media posts about him. He was arrested. We know that he had the ability to create crowds, to move people on the ground. And because of that, we knew that if there was a viral spike about him, that it would be censored. And that's exactly what happened. Red are censored, so red is never above gray. And what happened is there's a huge spike of activity, and the Chinese government follows them right up the hill and takes it all down. Right? Or here's a great example. So this was a city in China, I forget the name of it, where they had an environmental lottery. So what is that? It's a lottery where you put in a small amount of money and they randomly draw somebody to win. Right? And then a lottery makes a profit. Right? So where does the profit go? This town announced that the profit would go to the environment. And this was very popular. Everybody really liked this policy. They liked it so much that they decided to have a big rally for the government officials that announced this policy, right? In favor of the government officials. What happened? Okay, it goes viral. Like, look what a great thing these leaders are doing. A wonderful, wonderful thing. So there's a big spike of activity. What happens? Well, it was connected to actual protests on the ground. So they censored them all. Okay. They don't care what you think of them, they only care what you can do. So here's the most controversial policy I can imagine, telling people how many kids they can have. But there was no protest on the ground related to this particular incident, and so not much censorship. Or electrical prices, power prices, which generate protests all the time in the United States and all throughout the West. But there was no protest on the ground, so no real censorship. So that's the basic point. So let me switch now to the Chinese 50-cent party. So the idea of the 50-cent party is that individuals were rumored to be paid 50 cents, just a few pennies, to fabricate social media posts, to write them, and post them on the web in the name of ordinary people. The prevailing view of scholars about the 50-cent party, there's no political parties, of course, but that's what it's called. The prevailing view of scholars, of activists, of journalists, and of people on social media who we found who accused other people of being 50 cent, right? That's the fourth group that are theorizing about something for which they have zero evidence. Okay? So we went and collected all the scholars, activists, journalists, everything that they all wrote, and all the people on social media that accused someone else of being 50 cent. Okay? What do they all think? They all think the same thing. They all think that the 50-cent party argues with and debates against those who criticize the government, its leaders, and their policies. So if you say something bad about the government, the 50-cent party supposedly jumps in and argues against you. Okay? It argues against the people who argue against the government. Okay? Here's a test. Okay? In the United States, if you go to school in the United States and you learn and you're in third grade, 1, 2, 3, and you take spelling, right? And everybody learns the longest English language word because it turns out to be easy for a third grader to spell. You can sound it out. Does anybody know the name? You remember? So there you go. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So this is the longest English language word. It's anti-disestablishmentarianism. And that word means against the people who are against the government. So I got to use this word in a paper for the first time. I'd like to thank Mrs. McNeil, my third grade teacher. So what's the evidence that the 50-cent party argues against people who argue against the government? Well, there's a few anecdotes, which we have no idea the veracity of. Quotes from the literature say, there is no ground truth. Okay, I don't know why you should keep reading an article after it says there's no ground truth. Here's another quote. There are no successful attempts to quantify 50-cent party activity. That's a scholarly article. An accurate scholarly article. There's even several scholarly articles where the author makes up the dependent variable on the basis of the best plausible rules they could come up with, but still makes up the dependent variable, and then spends the rest of the article trying to explain the variable they just made up. Okay? These are very well-meaning articles, but nevertheless, there was no evidence, no ground truth. Okay, so what is it that we learned, right? Here's what we learned when we studied this, that this is utterly and completely wrong. The 50-cent party does not argue against people who argue against the government. That's not what they do. So what do they do? In fact, they don't engage on controversial issues at all. When there's controversial issues, they don't jump in and talk at all. What do? So what they do is they distract. They redirect public attention from criticism or argument about central issues to cheerleading and positive discussions of valence issues. So they post social media posts that say, "It's a beautiful day today." You know? Or I woke up this morning thinking about how important our martyrs were to the history of China. And they'll post that. Hundreds and hundreds of posts, millions of posts. I'll tell you how many soon. All right, and that's what they post. And you ask, why are they doing this? Why does the Chinese government spend so much money posting, cheerleading, drivel? Like, what's the point of this? Okay, so think about it. You're all great academics. Think of the last all-out fight you had with your spouse, or your parents, or your kids, or your siblings. Now, suppose you wanted to stop that fight. Okay? Option one is you can use the best reasoned academic argument about why they are wrong. How often did that work? Option two is to say, hey, let's go get ice cream. Right? Doesn't that work better? Okay? That's what the Chinese government's doing. Right? Arguing with somebody doesn't end arguments. Right? Saying let's go get ice cream sometimes does. So I'm going to provide the first systematic evidence about this point. There's never really been evidence before. So here's what we did. We found some on the web, open, reported by reporters. We didn't do this. A leaked email archive in Zhanggang, this one county in China. The Internet Propaganda Office. Someone got all the emails directed to this office. It was on the web. It was reported by reporters. But the reports basically said, look, we got the goods on the Chinese government. But they never actually read it. Okay? Why is that? What's in it is workers claiming credit for their 50-cent party posts. So in a sense, it's the first evidence of actual 50-cent party posts. It's not all of China. It's just one county. Okay? But let's look. It's a large, unstructured, messy data set. No surprise that the journalists didn't spend a lot of time analyzing it because it would have taken forever to do by hand. And to do it by computer would require specialization in automated text analysis, and that's not what they do. But it is what we do, so we thought, what the heck, right? So we systematized this. So what did we find? We found 2,341 emails covering 2 years, 2013 and 2014. There were 1,200 of these emails contained the text of 50-cent party posts. Okay? There were 43,797 known 50-cent party posts, which adds to the collective information about 50-cent party posts. If you take all of the 50-cent party posts that we know are 50-cent party posts in the world, and we add it to the 43,797, the sum of those two is 43,797. Okay, so basically there's never been any before, and now we have 43 or 44,000 posts that we know are 50-cent party posts, so we have something to study. So what we did is we studied them, and we mapped the patterns, not only the posts, but the patterns of who posted, what they posted, where they posted it, which social media site and they posted them on, what time of day, what time of year they posted them, and why they posted them, what was the substance of them. So we dissected the whole mechanism. And then once we did that, by the way, we knew who these people were. Like we had pictures of them, we had telephone numbers, email addresses, we know what office they worked in, we knew everything about these folks. Okay, we didn't publish that, but we knew all of them. We then extrapolate these patterns from this one county to the rest of China, and that's what I'm going to show you how we do. We build a model, a statistical model, based upon the patterns we found. We identify 50-cent party workers outside of Zhanggang, in other counties all across China. We sort of out them, right? We didn't give their names and addresses, but we could. So now we have a prediction for all of China about who's posting 50-cent party posts and what all the posts are and how many there are. Okay, but that's just a prediction, right? How do you know the prediction's right, you might ask me? So what we did is we did a survey and we asked them. Isn't that crazy? Right? And we got them to admit that they were doing it. I'll show you how. And then, even more crazy, we didn't plan. We got the Chinese government to admit that this was right. I'll explain. Okay. I'm going to just take a sip of water. Excuse me. I don't think I could do the second one again. But it was really cool that it happened. I'm not sure I wanted it to happen, but it happened. Okay, so here's the Zhanggang internet propaganda operation. So we take the 43,000 emails, and this just gives you a feel for what's going on. The prevailing view is ordinary citizens are getting paid 50 cents to make each social media post. But in fact, 99.3% of the posts are made by 200 government offices. So it's not people being paid. If you employ research assistants, imagine the following, okay? You're going to have somebody write social media posts, millions of them, very low paid workers, okay? And you're going to try to make it accurate, make them work accurately over the course of years. That would be really hard. Alternatively, if you're the Chinese government, you have millions of people working for you already. And so what you do is you just say, on your way home tonight, when you get home, I want you to post 3 things on the web. And you, I want you to post 5, and you, I want you to post 10. And that's what they do. And if you think about it, of course that's what they do, right? It's not, these are more highly paid employees. They know what they're doing. That's actually what's happening. So here's the Zhanggang County Propaganda Office. Each of these are the 200 offices that write into them, that say, okay, we've posted these posts. I've had my workers, like this one is one of the offices, and they're emailing the county propaganda office to report that they did their job, and we created this many social media posts on social media sites all across China, or different social media sites. And that's what they are. And then these are the Zhanggang County Internet Propaganda Office reporting to higher level officials. So this is the structure of the archive. In this, there's no evidence of 50-cent payments. So this rumor that people are being paid 50 cents seems to be totally false. It's probably just part of their ordinary jobs. Okay, so that's the first thing we discovered. All right, so in order to go further, we need to analyze what these 50-cent party posts are saying. And so to do that, we need to put them in some categories. So let's Let's do that. Okay. So we're going to estimate the distribution of these social media posts in different categories. So let me give you the categories. The categories are taunting of foreign countries and argumentative praise or criticism. This is pretty much this is anti-disestablishmentarianism, what everybody thought was true. Okay. There's non-argumentative praise or suggestions. They could just be factual reporting, or they could be cheerleading, right? So the first two is the prevailing view that this is what 50 Cent Party members are doing. They're arguing, and the remaining ones are what we find, and it's mostly the last one, which is cheerleading. Okay, so these are the 5 categories. I'm going to use these 5 categories as my theoretical lens to look at the data. Okay, and I'm going to do separate analyses from Zhanggang in stages all the way out to all of China. So my goal is all of China and then the world. No, just China. And I'm going to use these 5 categories. So let me tell you now the different analyses we'll do, starting with Zhanggang. So first of all, we have the leaked 50 Cent Party posts, the 43,797, just in Zhanggang. Then we limit that just to the Weibo posts. Why is that? Because Weibo posts are easier to find in other counties. Okay, so I'm going to narrow it to Weibo. And I have to see, are the Weibo posts approximately the same as all the posts across 1,400 different social media sites? If so, then that gives us some evidence that we can use Weibo to extrapolate. We then partition the accounts into 2 types of accounts. And what are the accounts? There's ordinary accounts, like a mom who writes about her kids, and then occasionally other things. And then there's another type of account where the mom who works in government did not want to bother or to disrupt her social media account with these posts that she's required to make. So instead what she did is she made a completely different kind of account that we call an exclusive account that is used exclusively for making 50 Cent Party posts. Okay? So there's these 2 kinds of accounts. One where the social media posts are hidden inside the ordinary account, and one in which they're much easier to spot. So we're going to hope that people are posting the same types of things on the 2 accounts. And if we can see that, then that's good, because we'll be able to extrapolate to the rest of the country and find the ones that are exclusive accounts much more easily. It will turn out to be true. So the exclusive accounts are ones that engage with, like follow the Zhanggang Weibo, right, the government office. And they have very few followers. So they're not very interesting accounts, okay? But they do reveal what they're doing. We then go another stage, which are unleaked posts in Zhanggang, but on exclusive 50 Cent Weibo accounts. So we expand to the rest of Zhanggang, even if they weren't in our leaked archive. And then we go to unleaked posts from exclusive 50 Cent Weibo accounts in all the counties across China. Okay, and that's our last stage. So we're going to take those 5 categories and apply them 5 times. Okay. All right. So let me give you the results in 1 page. Okay. So this is an analysis first of the 43,000 posts in Zhanggang. The vertical axis is the proportion of posts, and this is basically a histogram. So there's almost no taunting of foreign countries. There's almost no argumentative praise or criticism. There's a little bit of non-argumentative praise or suggestions, a little bit of factual reporting, and mostly cheerleading. So that's what 50 Cent Party people are doing. They're mostly saying it's a beautiful day today. Okay. In fact, this is what the literature said, right? I mean, we use the method of, we call it README, where Dan Hopkins and I published a paper in 2010 where you use a training set. We have undergraduates take posts, put them into categories, and then we take that training set, and in a much larger test set, we try to figure out not each individual post, because nobody cares about any one post. We just care about the percent in the category. So if you have that particular goal, then it's much better to use our procedure rather than like a classifier, which tend not to work very well. Okay? So that's what we used here, and it estimated these quite accurately. But it estimated these so small, I mean, it was literally 0.000, that we thought, this is what the literature says. So we went on a hunt for social media posts that were consistent with the literature. And it took a long time, but we found a couple which, if you squint, might support the literature. But really, like, these are almost nothing. Okay. So that's the first one. That's from the leaked emails. Then we limited from the leaked emails to just the Weibo accounts, but all the posts from those Weibo accounts, not only the ones in the archive. We identified the account. Once we had the account, we scraped all the posts from that account. And here's a histogram of that. So almost zero, small, small, much larger, although this one's a little bit not quite as large. Then we divided up into ordinary and exclusive, that's the red ones, and we wanted those to be the same, and it looks like they are. They're both the same as previous ones and also pretty much the same as each other. Okay? So that's good because we can use the exclusive ones to extrapolate to the rest of China. We then looked within the county at all the posts, even the ones that were not in our leaked archive, and again we're getting similar kinds of results. And then one more for we go out of county to the rest of China, and again we're getting essentially 0, 0, small, small, really big. Okay, and so this is what our basic result is. Okay, so these are our basic results. But now I have to convince you that since everything beyond the first one is a prediction, we have to make sure that the predictions are reasonable. Okay, so to do that, let me first stop and tell you how big this effort is in China. Right? How many posts are they actually fabricating? Right? Because it's not, this is not done by computer. We know how to do this by computer, but they're doing it by hand. We know because we know the people who write them. Okay? And we know each one of the people, we can check them out, we can look them up on the web, we can figure out whether they're real. This was not a fabricated archive. Okay? They don't do this by computer. We know how to do it by computer. We could do it by computer, right? We're not going to take a grant from the Chinese government to give them this technology, but it would be possible to make it much more efficient, which is scary because eventually they will get there. But at the moment, they have a lot of workers, so no big deal, you know? So how big is this 50-cent party? Well, here's the number in 2013. It's 2018 now, but in 2013, here's the number of social media posts in China. It was about 80 billion. Okay? Quite a lot of them were Weibo, but there were also blog posts, chat rooms, all kinds of other things. So about 80 billion total posts. Here's the number of 50-cent party posts in this one county, in Zhenggang. It's 154,000. The number of 50-cent party posts in the province in which Zhenggang lives is 10 million. And then, this is where the drum roll comes in, if any of you have a drum. The number of 50-cent party posts that the Chinese government fabricates every year, or at least in 2013, is 448 million. Now imagine being in charge of that operation. Okay? Writing 448 million fabricated posts a year. That is a big job, right? Not one that I want, right? But that's an enormous job. Okay, they're putting an incredible amount of effort into this. Basically 450 million social media posts a year. About half of these, 53%, are on government sites, because on government sites there are comments and things like that. It's a noticeable proportion of all the posts. About half, or 47%, are on commercial sites, the ones that everybody knows. And on commercial sites, it's one of every 178th post. Okay? Now here's the question. Is it literally every 178th post? In which case it would be like shouting into the wind, right? Now, it wouldn't have any impact at all. Or are they using it in some more strategic way? So we have to figure that out. Let's figure that out. Okay? Turns out they're much more strategic. They're highly coordinated. Here's a plot of the 43,000 in Zhenggang. This is the vertical axis is the count, and the horizontal axis is the date during these 2 years. And you see, during most times, there are no posts at all, almost no posts. And then every once in a while, they fire a big cannon when they need it. when they think either there are protests, or there might be protests, or they're concerned about protests, or they're concerned about some kind of collective action, they fire this cannon. And they basically dilute the whole web, right? If you are trying to create some collective action, you're trying to create some protest, you put something on social media and you say, let's all go to the town square and appear there. And then somebody else, ideally, would post the same thing or retweet what you have, right? If at the same time as you're doing that, there are hundreds and hundreds and thousands of posts that say, it's a beautiful day today, then it's going to be hard to find what it is that you're saying. And that's what they're doing, right? Only every once in a while, only when they need it. So it's highly coordinated. And the events appear to be things with high collective action potential. Okay? So it also seems to clearly convey, again, this elephant tiptoeing around. A big operation, it conveys the government's intent, even for an organ of the government designed to slow the flow of information. It conveys a lot of information about itself. Okay? So, how do we validate 50 Cent Party membership predictions? I mean, just because I told you there's 450 million of these, and I made a prediction with a nice little fancy method, how is it that you know that what my prediction is right? I think that's what we got to really focus on, right? So how do we know that these people that we're predicting to make 50 Cent Party posts are actually making 50 Cent Party posts? Well, we figured, let's ask them, right? It's crazy enough. Let's just give it a try, okay? All right, so these are not your optimal survey respondents, okay? Their job is to intentionally mislead, right? That's their job. About the subject of the survey that we are going to ask them, right? So you don't want these survey respondents as your survey respondents. They take orders, obviously, from an uncompromising government. Their employer is that government. That potentially at stake is their job, or maybe more. So we have other concerns. We don't really want to get any individuals in trouble. How are we going to do this? Okay. So we came up with the following survey. We first took a random sample of the 50 cent of the accounts we predicted to be 50 cent. So we predicted, and then we took the ones that we thought were 50 cent. Okay, now what do we do? So it turns out there's an extensive literature in the social sciences, maybe some of you know, about asking highly sensitive questions. Imagine public health workers who have to do a survey to figure out about your private sexual behavior, right? Or income, which is often even more sensitive than sexual behavior, or other kinds of, or in a country that is even more overbearing than China. Asking questions about the leadership might not be something people would be forthcoming about. And it turns out there are special ways that social scientists have come up with to ask questions in those situations. So we used every single one of those that we could, even so, okay? We also studied the local social media context, so we didn't seem like three crazy Americans, asking an insane question of people doing their job. We then administered a double-blind survey, so they didn't know who we were and we didn't know who they were, or at least programmatically, via direct messaging on Weibo. We then specially designed and pre-tested a survey question. Now, I'm not going to tell you the exact text that we used for the survey question because we don't want people to be able to search to find these folks, but I'll give you a version of it. And then translate it into English, which you can dutifully translate back to Chinese somehow. I saw your comment. It's really inspiring. Okay, so your comment on social media, it's really inspiring. So you don't make it sound bad. I want to ask, do you have any public opinion guidance management or online commenting experience? So public opinion guidance is the term of art in China, meaning censorship and other kinds of information control. Okay, so we did that, and that's going to be our validation. But of course, we're also going to need to make sure that the validation itself is right. Because after all, this is a crazy survey. Why should the survey itself work, right? So we're using the survey to judge this other thing that was crazy. All right, so we're going to validate the validation. We're going to ask the same question of a sample of 50 Cent Party members that we know for sure are 50 Cent Party members because they were in that leaked archive. And we're going to see whether we get roughly the same answers as we do for the predicted 50 Cent Party members. So we have a way to validate our predictions. And then we'll also ask the same question of people known, pretty much known not to be 50 Cent, and see whether we get very different answers. So let me show you the results. Okay, so we have people predicted to be 50 Cent all across China. So these are the people that are predicted outside of Zhonggang. And we asked them pretty much, are you 50 Cent Party members? And the percent that agreed that we got to admit we're 50 Cent Party members was 59%. That's pretty good by itself, don't you think? So like roughly 60% of the people said, yeah, I'm fabricating social media posts, roughly. Okay, so I thought that was pretty good, okay? But, you know, like let's validate the validation. So let's now take people that we knew for sure were 50 Cent from the leaked archive and ask the same question of them. How many of them said that they were 50 Cent? 57%. And I say, as a methodologist, that 59% and 57%, that's the same number. Don't you think? And then we looked at people who were not 50 Cent, just basically a random sample. Some of them maybe, but is a small fraction. About 19% were 50, much, much lower. Okay? And the difference between the first two, of course, is not statistically significant. And the difference between the first one and the last one is. And so this seems like pretty good confirmation that our validation and confirmation that our predictions were accurate. Okay. Okay, so that was supposed to be the end of our paper. And then something else happened. So we were privately sharing the draft of our paper with colleagues, like folks that we knew. We gave them a copy of our paper and we said, could you give us comments so that we could revise it and then make it available and send it for publication. That did not last because somehow a reporter from a Western outlet got a copy of our paper. I don't know how they got it. They sent me an email and said, hey, I'm going to write a news article about your paper. Could you answer these questions? And I said, well, you know, hold on a second, okay? We haven't published this paper. I haven't even put it on my website. In fact, we're not even finished with the paper. Could you please wait? And he said, no. And, you know, Molly and Jen and I, we thought, should we have an argument with this guy about freedom of the press in the context of a paper about fabricating social media posts? And we thought, all right. And so we answered his questions and put the paper in its unfinished state. It was almost finished on our website. As it happened, his article was published. Within a few hours, it was in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg and, you know, papers all over the world. According to Google News, there were 5,000 newspaper articles on our little preprint. Okay, so many that the Chinese government responded. Okay, how did they do this? Okay, and why did they do this? And it really would have been better if they hadn't. But anyway. They wrote an editorial in the Global Times. You know this paper? Yeah. So it's a CCP-controlled nationalist paper. So it's the extreme pro-China end of things. First of all, they published it only in Chinese, right? Even though the Global Times is published in English and Chinese, almost everything in the Global Times is published in both. They only published it in Chinese. They did not publish it in English. That's actually consistent with our hypothesis that the main thing that they're interested in is their own people. They didn't care about explaining to the people that read the 5,000 newspaper articles that they read the wrong thing or something like that. They only wanted to explain to their people what they were doing. So we thought, okay, that's confirmation. Then they actually admitted to the existence of the 50 Cent Party almost or essentially for the first time or something close to it. Okay, we thought, that's good. They confirmed the veracity of our leaked archive, right? Which now the archive itself was a little sketchy, okay? But they agreed to the veracity of it. They summarized our results. The first paragraph of their paper is a very nice summary of our paper, an accurate summary of our paper. They took no issue with any of our conclusions. At no point did they say in this article, they called us naive or nerds or something like that, but they did not at any point disagree with anything we said. Okay? So they also explicitly acknowledged that the purpose of public opinion guidance, remember that term of art, is to stop the spread of grassroots social issues with collective action potential. They literally stated our hypothesis as confirmation. Okay, so we say in the paper that this is roughly like posing a survey question not to a respondent, not to a former member of the government, not to a current member of the government, but to the government. And we asked the government, sort of effectively, are we we roughly asked them, do you agree with our results? And the government, as a government, issued a proclamation that said, yeah. I'm exaggerating, but so why would they do this, right? So you might ask the question, why would they do this? Okay. Well, the editorial says Chinese society is generally in agreement regarding the necessity of public opinion guidance. And we thought, well, that's an interesting empirical hypothesis, which we can test. So let's test it, right? Let's test this testable hypothesis. So we went first to the nationalist, the Global Times website where there are comments, and then we went to all of Weibo. We would expect things consistent with them, with what they're saying on this website, and inconsistent, or we'll see in Weibo. So 82% of people on their website agree that public opinion guidance is essential. No surprise. Okay. But the real question is what percentage are supportive of this general idea that they have to do what they're doing on the more representative Weibo? And the answer is 30%. Okay? So this hypothesis is incorrect. So the results indicate that the figures are accurate. The figures are accurate because they don't censor criticism, and they don't make up posts that are about the policy area. So that means when we say 30%, that's probably right. Okay? Ones that are commenting about this activity are actually the right ones. This indicates that the regime has a problem because the people do not support this policy. So why did they do this? They probably did this because they wanted their people to understand what they were doing, and they thought that conveying this was important to them and important to their people. And if they could convince them that it was important to do this activity, maybe their people would be a little more forgiving. Okay? And that's, I think, what they were trying to do. In addition, of course, to trying to help 3 academics from the United States. That was a joke, just so you know if anyone's listening. Okay, last page. So some theoretical implications. For China, they do not engage on controversial issues. They do not censor criticism. They do not fabricate posts and post them on the web in the name of other people in order to argue against criticism. They don't do either of those. What they do is they try to stop collective action. They respond to grievances. Actually, they respond to grievances with different public policies in order to prevent collective action. They give incentives to their local leaders to respond in some ways to prevent collective action. They censor discussion of real-world collective action. They distract with cheerleading and positive valence kinds of "It's a beautiful day today" posts. And that's what they do. More generally, for authoritarian regimes, scholars have thought that autocrats want to not let anybody know about grievances because they might rise up, and that would increase the cost of coordination. But we find that China has 2 versions of this common knowledge. Grievances, which are allowed, maybe everybody has a grievance living in an autocratic country. Knowing one more isn't going to create any big deal. They just think it's no problem. It's already well known. What is not well known and not allowed is collective action. It's considered a big problem. They do whatever they can to stop it. It's sort of like a hair on fire event, right? Your hair is on fire, you act right now. So we also learned that arguments never end arguments. You may use that at home if you wish. But distraction is usually pretty good. So for future research, the one thing I leave you is when studied at scale, Chinese government information controls leave big footprints. And we can study those big footprints and learn a lot about the leaders and their intentions and their policies and what they're going to do in the future better than we could with other methods. So I thank you very much, and you can find some more information there.
The floor is open. It's a golden opportunity for people who are really into the topic. Right here. Okay. Yeah. Can you identify yourself?
My name is Carl from UT Dallas, University of Texas at Dallas.
Uh-huh.
I think the two potential causes, collective action, I think this is really, really good finding, I think. But on the other hand, about the stopping of the censorship could be further study. For example, the two things could be connected, may not be necessarily exclusive or mutually. One potential problem is, for example, once the criticism is identified, the account will be blocked. That means there's no more criticism from that account. In other words, the identity matters. The identity of that account matters. So from the network analysis perspective, so that node is already gone. In other words, there's no data on that node. So how likely there is a possibility to incorporate that, how the anonymous or anonymization of the data could be incorporated in the study, because the data could not be represented because it's totally gone, and the identity of that account matters too, right? For example, so someone famous raising criticism, but this person criticizing could be potential. We have a high potential for the next step, which is collective action, because people will follow them. And in case I will raise posting something criticizing his criticism, of course, is not allowed because he is the source of collective action himself.
Mm-hmm. So this is a really good question, which we actually looked into, and it turned out that famous people or people with lots of followers or anyone who can create a big spike of activity on the web is sort of in this category, right? And some of them would be censored and some of them wouldn't be. And we kept looking. And it turns out that if a famous person like Ai Weiwei had created collective action on the ground in the past, then when he says something that goes viral, it will be censored, pretty much no matter what. But if somebody creates something that goes viral for good reasons or bad reasons, or it looks to you and me like it's going to create collective action, but there was no demonstration of having done it in the past, no censorship. I'll give you one example. There was a kindergarten, there was a school principal that had been caught with 6 kindergarten girls in his hotel room. Okay. The mom of one of those girls, do you know this? The mom of one of those girls had made up a placard and went to the outside the school and put and it said, "Leave the girls, take me," and she held it up. Okay, and it went viral on the web, enormously viral. And you can imagine this would create collective action, no question. But it did not create collective action. She was the only one there. On the web, people were taking pictures of themselves. "Leave the girls, take me," or "Leave the girls, dial the emergency number, right? Or dial my number, whatever it is. Leave the girls." It went enormously viral. There was no collective action. Right? It has to be related to actual collective action on the ground. And maybe it's because the people that are actually making the censorship decisions are low-level, very low-level employees. This is not a fun job. And they're given an instruction. And I believe the instruction is, if you find somebody that has created collective action in the past, and something goes viral about them, take them all down. Doesn't matter whether they're for it or against it, take them all down. I think that's what happened. So.
Right here, yeah. Microphone, 这位先。
Yeah, I'm Joseph Dao Yuan. I'm an economist doing experiments. So I'm really curious about the survey experiment.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm particularly interested in, so with the group that you said that you know that, these are not 50-cent groups. So did you try to match that known characteristics of that random sample to the characteristics of the known 50-cent group sample, or is it just a or just a random sample?
Yeah, no, that's a good question also. We just tried to get people that, as best as we could know, were not 50 cent, or at least with low probability. So that's basically what we did. Right? We did some matching in the way that you're describing. So we would survey them from the same places as the ones that were 50 cent. So yeah.
So a question about the cheerleading findings. I think it's fascinating that the main goal of 50 cents is cheerleading, posting something like, this is a beautiful day. But as you said, there's some exclusive accounts, whose purpose is posting those cheerleading posts. And I assume very few real humans actually follow those exclusive accounts. So what's the point of posting cheerleading posts if there's no people follow them? Thanks.
So the same thing that was posted on the exclusive accounts was also posted on ordinary accounts. So that's the first thing. It's the same exact kind of information in the same way by the same people. That's the first. But the same thing is the way Chinese social media works is it's not like Twitter. So on Twitter, if you have 10 followers and they're then basically nobody sees your posts. But on Weibo, if you put a post on somebody else's, on some famous account, it goes in the stream of that account. We can then find it because it also appears on your account, but it appeared on someplace important. So we don't get to know exactly where it was, but that's the way it works. So.
Yi from University of California, San Diego. I agree with you on the interpretation that criticism on local officials, allowing criticism on local officials is a mechanism of monitoring and sanctioning. But I think that it's possible that the dichotomy between corrective action and criticism may be too simple. Because as a daily user of Weibo, I feel if you criticize a high-level official, even you mention Peggy the pig or Winnie the Pooh, you will be censored because it relates to a certain leader. So what do you think of the more complex situation of censorship in terms of really politically sensitive issues?
So I've of course heard these media reports. I personally don't like Winnie the Pooh either, but having read every book like that to my kids, that's my least favorite. But anyway, I think actually there is a very big difference in this area in particular, but perhaps all big data areas, between the methods of journalists and the methods of social scientists. And journalists will come and they'll find one person that had a social media post censored, and they will spin a great story from that one example. So I'm not even sure whether the theory that Winnie the Pooh is censored is actually correct systematically across the web. Yes, it's testable. I agree. I totally agree with you. And I want to test it. Yeah, that's right. And so since we wrote our paper, and we did the original research in 2011 and 2010, like every few weeks, somebody says, so it's changed now, right? And we can't test it every day, but every once in a while we go back, we test it again, and it's consistent, same thing. It seems like the same thing. When we did our experiment where we fabricated posts ourselves in criticism and in support, we wrote posts criticizing the leader, and they were not censored any more than any other. So it may be that it changes tomorrow. We don't really know. It may be that some of these things are right, but I'm just very wary of the method of journalism in this particular case because we didn't see the patterns until we were able to measure millions and millions of posts. And no one's done that for Winnie the Pooh. He deserves it, but.
Okay,
So-
I'm going to just pick up 2 more questions from the floor due to time limit. So Darcy first and Xufeng.
Thank you, Chairman. I just have a very small question. I would like to know, do you want to evaluate the kind of effectiveness of this information controls strategy? And did you try to do kind of connection between if they offer a lot of cheerleading message post, then what happened to the area, the kind of outcome, effectiveness, and whether these kind of strategies is really useful to control so-called collective action? Yeah.
I think it's a really great question. And we haven't run the experiment to try to stop collective action ourselves. And so I don't know for sure. I think in some sense, because the human attention span is limited, there's only so many things we can pay attention to at once. If the web is filled with things that are distractive, I think to some extent it has to work. And the fact that they are doing this in big bursts, big cannon bursts every once in a while makes it more likely to work. But you're right, we need to do this study to figure out whether it reduces collective action. I think.
From other side of the data, from the local kind of the proposal.
Yes, from the local side also. To generalize your point, just because the leaders have a rule that says we want to stop collective action doesn't mean that collective action is stopped. It may be that they're conveying to the citizens the things that would really annoy them, that would really get them motivated, right? So if you're in China and you're willing to deal with a little risk, or maybe a lot of risk, and you want to change your public policy, probably collective action is the best possible thing you could do. And the rumors are there's a lot of collective action in China. This is another thing that there isn't really good evidence about, but there's supposedly lots of protest. So I think that the thing we're studying is not something the government is doing to the people, because the people are responding, right? It's a cat and mouse game. It's an arms race on both sides, and we should figure out how to study the other side. I think this is a good point.
Yeah.
My name is Xufeng Zhu from Tsinghua University in Beijing, and my question is currently in mainland China, the younger generations are actually very proud of to be admitted as a 50-cent party.
They're proud to be a 50? Wait, I'm not sure what you mean. They're proud that there is one?
To admit themselves as a 50 party.
Oh, they're proud to say that you're a 50 center.
No, themselves.
I'm supporting regime.
Oh, I see. But you don't mean that they're being paid. You mean that they are nationalists.
First is someone, of course, they are not paid by the government,
I
but
see.
they are support. And also they call themselves as the 50 cent party. So this is, I think this is not a very big deal for us to whether you are 50 cent party, because this is not sensitive at all, and not secret, because this is actually this is their proud of it. Another one is maybe it's the reverse. Is now in China there is another party, like a $5 party, $5 cent party.
Yes, yes.
So they are not agree with to admit to be paid by the U.S. government. So if you are trying to research on this kind of party, what the methodology would you use to explore
Yes.
how many people
Yes.
in China are 50 U.S. cents party?
Yes, it's an excellent point. And the answer is that we don't use the content of the message to decide whether they're 50 cent or not. And your point basically is it is not possible to use the content to figure out who's doing it, or to figure out who's paying for it. Because there are plenty of people in China that hold nationalist positions, that support the government as much as the government, and are proud to put that message out on the web. That's absolutely true. And there's plenty of other people that want to take anti-American views, and plenty of other people that take the opposite views. We can't use the views to figure out what they are. But we can use the kinds of things we did by who they were, where they were posting, what types of accounts they were posting on, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's how we did it. And then we used the content to figure out what the people we found were 50 Cent, we predicted were 50 Cent, we validated were 50 Cent, were posting. So that's what. Yeah, but that's the same thing. Those are the people who have a particular position on social media. I mean, one of the great things about this is that in social media, they're not censoring criticism. So that means there is criticism. They're not, right, the criticism we see there seems to be real. The arguments against criticism also seem to be real. So that means social media analysis is valuable for us scholars because it's real to some extent. There's every manner of opinion in China, and they express themselves. So.
Lovely.
Thank you, everybody.
I think I have really enjoyed immensely your presentation, but also the interaction, the dialogue, and we are very fortunate that we have another chance to do this tomorrow morning. Professor King will deliver the second keynote. Just like a Star Wars series. Sometimes the second is better than the first one. So anyway, this is about time to have tea break, but before we break up, let's have another big applause.